One problem with Norse mythology is that the sources we have contradict each other very often. Even if the source is written by the same author sometimes, like Snorri Sturluson, who writes in the Middle Ages. He wrote something in Heimskringla and wrote something completely different in the Prose Edda. One thing that is perhaps the most contradicting is the locations of certain events, deities, gods, and their homes in the myths. It just goes to show what I always say here. The myths are not to be read like literal events and places and superhuman, like Marvel-like gods. They are written in a somewhat hidden code and they have a deeper meaning, and that's what I'm going to speak about in this video. And most of what I'm going over is covered in a paper by Eldar Heide, one of the few professors on the subject that I really respect and trust. I think his article is free online. It's a little older, but I'll see if I can find it and I'll put it in the link below. So basically, it's about all these different locations we find in the myths, and it's sending us all around in a circle looking, and it's not a literal place in this world, but it's symbolic for like the other world or other dimension or the other side. Eldar defines it as the world beyond what we can access by natural means, which is why all these locations are kind of listed as, impossible places to reach for us here in the physical world. So what we're going over are a few locations and showing the contradictory sources, and I'm speaking about why this all is at the end. So first, Midgard, Earth, or supposedly Earth, right? Just written by Snorri in the Prose Edda, the Earth was disc-shaped, surrounded by an ocean, and on the outside of that was Jotun, like giant settlements along the coasts. Now, inside all of that was the region of men, and that was Midgard, and that was fenced in. Okay, so this is very important. A lot of people translate Midgard to Earth, but here Snorri specifically used two different words for Earth and Midgard. This is two different words in Old Norse. Very clear there. Don't think of these things as, when we speak about the 9 worlds, we don't think of these things as different worlds or planets, but they are different dimensions. Midgard is just the human's dimension, and the one here, what we can perceive with our eyes and ears and senses and so on, but there are others. So what does this all mean about our world and the others? Hold on, I'll cover it at the end. Then we get to Hel, the realm of the dead, and sources say different things about where this is. Grimnismal says that Hel is under the root of the world tree, Hugr. A few poems locate Hel at being below Earth, Fyrjor nedan. In Baldur's Draumer, another poem, Odin rides to Hell, but on Foldveger, so the road on the ground specifically, that's what it is. So it's definitely a direction on the earth, on the surface of the earth. In the Prose Edda, Hermodr is traveling to Hell to get Balder out, and Snorri states there that the road to Hell goes norður og niður, north and down. He doesn't say anything about a passage into the earth. It's in this Prose Edda source clearly on a landscape, but it does go down, sometimes like downhill, we would assume by reading this. This also appears in the poem Hellreid Brynhildar, about Brynhilde's ride to Hell. Then we have Balder in the Prose Edda, who also travels horizontally to Hell, not going underground, but he's put on the ship and he's pushed out to sea, set on fire, and then the last part of the journey to Hell, he rides on horseback over a bridge. So those are the sources about Hel saying different things. Where is it really? Wait till the end and you'll see. Then we have Jotunheim, the land of the giants, the bad guys. So lots and lots of different places for this. In the Prose Edda, Snorri also says that the Jotunar live in a mountainous region along the sea surrounding Midgard, like I said before. But in one poem, Skirnismal, it states that Skirnir passes through darkness and he travels across wet mountains and through a flickering flame to reach the Jotun living there. Most sources also say that the Jotnar live to the east. It's usually when Thor is traveling to fight the giants, it always says he's traveling to the east. Also in Völuspá, when Ragnarök comes, the giants are coming in, attacking the gods from the east. But in Gylfangning and Skaldskaparmal, Jotunheim lies in the north, and in Gylfangning he states that the Jotun girl lives in the north, the Gjerdir, the giantess's name was. Another one in Völuspá, Surt, the fire giants, comes from the south. In Thrimskrida, it says it's only possible to reach Jotunheim through the air, and Thor and Loki go together in the chariot, but when Loki is alone flying there, he has to borrow Freya's falcon cloak. Another poem, Grimnismal, the Jotnar live under a root of the tree of Yggdrasil, so that would be also at the very center of the earth located. And in Skirnismal, we learn that one giant lives below the corpses, basically, so below Hel. So that would be really, really in the center of the earth. In Havamal, the most famous poem you probably all know, when Odin gets the sacred mead, it says there that it's located someplace under the ground. But when Odin wants to get out, he does not have to crawl back like he crawled in, but he turns into an eagle and he just flies out of there even when he's underground. So it seems like the giants are absolutely everywhere. Anyway, on to the next one. Årskardet, the land of the gods. The Prose Edda and Grimnismal say that the gods keep their assembly place by Yggdrasil, so again, the tree at the center of the earth. In Lokasemna, the gods live somewhere in the far east, and Agir and the Vanir live to the east too, but slightly less east than the Asir. There are also some passages that say the gods kind of live below water somewhere, like Frigg, who lives in Fenrisalir, and in Grimnismal, it speaks of a goddess called Soga, who lives at a sunken beach and sits there drinking with Odin as the waves roll above them, so underwater there. But again, Snorri in the Prose Edda says that the gods live somewhere up in the sky, so where the hell are the gods? Don't know. Finally, before I finish, we'll speak about Valhalla, or Valhöll. It's also mentioned to be different places. Saxo Grammaticus and actually quite a few other Old Norse sources basically imply that water has to be crossed in the horizontal plane in order to get to Valhöll. And Saxo also describes a horse ride from the realm of men across the ocean to the home of Odin. A poem called Fjordauða Sinfjötla. The body of Sinfjötli is shipped across a fjord after his death. We don't know from that poem if he actually goes to Valhalla, but in another poem it does mention him as being one of the residents of Valhöll. In a very good one, Heljakvida Hundingsbanda, Valhöll is to the west of Heaven's Bridge, and there it was where the hero Helgi arrives. He arrives there by the flight road. It's called Flugstiger. So, after all this, what are the conclusions? What are the hypotheses? What is the educated academic question we can ask? The question is, what the fuck? How do we make sense of all that load of shite? Not only do the locations of the mythology contradict itself, but it contradicts itself in the same sources sometimes. But what we all have to understand is this is really nothing new and nothing unique to the Norse beliefs and mythology. We find examples of this from all over Europe, pagan religions, from the mythology, and folk tales from later on in time, and we even find this in Christian and Jewish sources, and they kind of even place the realms of the dead at different places. So basically, the only thing we can be certain of by all these descriptions of the locations in the Norse text is that these different places are not here in the physical world with us. We can call them different dimensions in this case. We know that in modern times, of course, we won't get to Valhalla if we sail straight across a body of water into the sunset. We know that we won't get to Hel no matter how far we dig. And no matter how far we travel east, we're not going to find any giants there, okay? We know this today with our modern science, and I think our ancestors were smart enough to figure that out too. So for sure, we are not talking about these different worlds as they call them, as places on this earth or even places out there in the universe. But they're different dimensions. It wasn't locations in our physical world that the Norse believed that these were all at. So Eldar makes a point. Says basically in the horizontal plane, humans at the time could have reached very far in all directions, right? And us even today, we can reach very far on the horizontal plane. But down into the earth or rock or underneath the water or even up into the sky, we can't reach that far, right? So our perception of up and down is only a very short distance. Nevertheless, people in all times have imagined these as not absolute limits. The end of the world didn't end down there, up there, as far as we could perceive it. They knew something else was beyond there, but they perhaps assumed that only supernatural powers, things like spiritual journeys, creatures, or sorcerers, or rituals, that's some ways to get to these places. Not get to these places, but our soul, or our Hugr in the Norse beliefs can do that. You can check out my video I did on Hugr. And one way to think of these locations is not the actual location that it's in, but the direction that it's listed in the Norse sources as a potential maybe passageway over the ocean, underground, to the north, and so on. And these places are perhaps just a gateway. Like if you sit in a sacred place or go underground or do some, shamanic ritual facing to the north or to the east or whatever and send your soul out that way. It's probably easier to achieve that state of consciousness if you are in these places or heading in these directions. That's one possibility. And there's not just one, but several methods that we can use to get to these different realms, but the actual location that is referred to in the mythology may be a place where rituals were done. We see one example of this at a very real place, actually, in Denmark called Læsø. It's one of these that is listed in sagas and also mythological texts as a place where humans and gods could come in and out of different realms. I have not been to this place, but it's a real island in Denmark, but I will for sure go there one day, and there are definitely a few others that were probably used as gateways or portals even. I'll do a video on those later. Also, a very cool note, we can say certain funeral practices probably were influenced by this cosmology as well, as a way to reach the proper realm that you're supposed to go to after you die. If you are supposed to go to Hel, you would be buried underground. If you're supposed to go to Valhalla, you would be sent across an ocean or maybe buried with a ship. Or if you needed to go someplace very far in the east across land, maybe you would be buried with your horse or cremated with your horse. And just being cremated probably played a role too. All cool things to think about. So finally, here is a list of the ways that I went over that were ways tested to get to these other realms. I don't know, check it out, give it a try, meditate, experiment with it in these places or directions, and let us know what you think. I'll conclude this video with a quote from Eldar. He says, "Would you not accordingly, beyond what you and I can reach, be a simpler way to understand the notion that lay behind these formulations, the passageways to the beyond being re-recycled again and again in these myths and poems, because this is the manner of thinking that was useful and economical, as long as only one version of the beyond was featured in any given case." So basically, yeah, as I'm always saying, the myths should not be read like literal events and places. And don't read into it word for word either and try to come up with an explanation for every little part. The little small details in the myths are not that important. The important part is the general idea of the myths, and it's not always supposed to make logical sense when you read it word for word, just like a folk tale or a Disney movie is not supposed to make logical sense all the time. Most of the time there are hidden meanings and messages in these, and if we work just a little bit, we can figure out what those are. But yeah, that's my video on the contradictory cosmology. That's it for today. Vi ses neste gang.